Hi, everybody. So this lecture is going to help you with understanding how to look at a problem in your research paper. And we're going to be using addiction as an example while we talk about that, because this is one of the problems that we're researching for some of my classes. Um, so we're looking at the causes of addiction as one example problem that we could deal with for the research paper. So, some things to remember about your research paper. First of all, your research paper, one of the parts of it involves choosing a problem and looking at that problem in a detailed way. And when you're doing that for the paper, you have a couple of different goals here. So one of those goals is to persuade us to believe that the problem you're discussing is important and something that we should pay attention to and care about. So it's a little bit different than a traditional research paper in that you're not just presenting, research to inform us about a topic, but instead you're also persuading us a bit and trying to get your audience to care about that topic. Another goal for the paper is to inform us about all of the complexities surrounding the problem you're discussing. So in this part, you should be looking at things like what causes this problem, what sorts of things make it difficult to address this problem or to, solve it, so to speak. You can also look at things like who's affected by this problem, where does it happen, when does it happen, or how long has it been happening? So there's a lot to discuss when you think about a particular problem. And the goal here is to sort of understand that these problems are really complex and they're not things that have simple answers or just two sides to the story, right? So it's about expanding our understanding and starting to look at these problems in a more complex and deeper thinking type of way. When you're planning for the research paper, also, you can expect that about 1/3 of your essay should focus on informing us about the problem. And to do that, you should be using research. So, this is where your outside sources come in. And also make sure that that section is organized with cohesive paragraphs that support your overall discussion of the problem. So we're going to look at addiction and sort of look at what that looks like. How do we form paragraphs to talk about these complex problems? So some things to do when you're looking at valuing complexity. So when we're valuing complexity, we are talking about problems in this case, but we're talking about them in, newer and interesting ways. Rather than just saying, yes, this is a problem, we're looking at, well, what kinds of things cause this problem? Why haven't we been able to find solutions to it? Why should we care? And so on. So first of all, we want to remember that none of the problems that we look at for class are going to have just one simple cause, right? Because we're looking at real world issues, things that happen all over the place and have been problems for a long time, and we still don't have answers to. And it's not that nobody's trying to solve these problems, right? It's that they're caused by lots of complex different factors, and we have to understand those things in order to have a chance at understanding the problem, let alone, trying to provide some answers as to what we can do to help make things better. So first of all, just remembering that these don't have a simple cause, and that's okay. Also, it's important to look at all of the contributing factors. So for instance, if we look at addiction and substance abuse problems, lots of the time we can see that all kinds of things come together to make this thing a problem, right? It's not that somebody just, gets addicted to drugs for fun, right? Or because they're like, yes, I would like to have a substance use problem. No, instead, there are generally lots of things that contribute to that. You might have some biological risk factors that make you more, prone to having a substance use problem, for instance. There are also psychological risk factors that come into play and social risk factors. And then when all of these things, or some of them, overlap, that's when research shows us that people are more prone to those types of problems. So if we were to only look at biological risk factors, for instance, we wouldn't be looking at the whole picture. So when we're valuing complexity, instead of just looking at one thing, we want to look at all of those things that cause whatever problem we're looking at. So in your essay, you should be doing that, right? You should be looking at all of those contributing factors. You should plan on addressing lots of those factors in the problem section of your essay. It's okay if you can't get to all of them, but plan on addressing several of them. And in those paragraphs where you're looking at these things, you should be explaining how each of those factors contributes to the problem. And this is how you're going to be making claims while also being informative. Because, of course, all of these things can be argued about, right? People don't agree on how much biological risk factors have to do with substance use problems. There are different competing views about that. So after you've researched all of these things, that's when you're going to sort of make your own stance and say, well, it seems like this is a risk factor and here's why. Or it seems like this is a risk factor and here's why. And so you're making claims, but you're also informing us, and then you'll use evidence to support those claims. So our research for the week that you are dealing with addiction looks at various things that lead people to becoming addicted. And we've got lots of different people who have different things to say about this topic, right? They're all speakers and authors who have researched this and looked into it extensively, and they're experts on the subject. But they still have different ways of approaching the problem, and that's totally fine. We want to look at and sort of value all of those different things that can contribute to a problem. So some of the factors that our authors and our speakers talked about were a lack of socialization, a lack of meaningful connections, mental health issues, physical health issues, lack of resources available to help people who need treatment for addictions, and then a lack of understanding about what causes addiction in the first place. So according to our authors and speakers, all of these things can contribute to the problem. So when you're researching something, let's say that you decided that you wanted to talk about addiction and the causes of it, then you would need to make claims about each contributing factor and plan your paragraphs accordingly. So there are some example claims here. One reason people remain addicted to drugs or alcohol is a lack of opportunities to socialize with others, which leads to a feeling of emptiness that they try to fill with drugs or alcohol. Another example claim: addiction is also common in people with mental health issues, and sometimes people use drugs or alcohol as a way to cope with mental pain. Another reason people suffer from addiction is due to a lack of resources available to help people get off drugs. So these are just a few claims that if I were writing about this particular topic, I could start my paragraphs off with. And by having a claim here, it lets my reader know, number one, what this paragraph is going to be about, but also it gives me something to sort of support and look back to when I'm gathering evidence, right? So you want to make sure that you have claims and that they're purposeful, because this is going to be the basis of the rest of your paragraph. So if I were writing about this, I would be basing an entire paragraph off of this claim. I would find evidence that supports the claim, and then I would talk about this topic throughout the rest of my paragraph. And then I'd have, several of these that would help me to build that problem section of my essay. So once you have those claims, then the next step is finding evidence to support your claims. So I've got some example claims and evidence here, and you want to make sure that your evidence matches or supports your claim. So for instance, if I claim that addiction is caused by a lack of socialization and loneliness, then my evidence would be that according to this author, Drugs transport us away from loneliness and isolation. That's why we use them, right? That's a claim that he made. So I can back up my own claim with a claim that an expert in the field made. And then I would go on to explain how this shows that, I'm not the only one who thinks this. There's some evidence out there that supports my claim that a lack of socialization and loneliness can contribute to addiction. Another example here, some people use drugs as a way to cope with mental health issues. If this is my claim, then I would need evidence to support that. And my evidence could be that according to this person, drugs and alcohol alleviate the severe psychological distress typically experienced by patients with comorbid psychiatric disorders and associated problems. So again, just putting the quote next to the claim is not quite enough because you do need that explanation piece next. However, if you have your claims, then as you're reading, you can find evidence that supports those claims and make a note of that. So when the time comes to complete a discussion board or to start writing your essay, for instance, you have the claim and the evidence that supports it ready to go. So when we're developing paragraphs, remember to use the quote sandwich method to finish developing those paragraphs. You want to include the claim, which you've built based on what you have, learned about the topic through your reading or your research. And then you also want to include your evidence, and those are the things that you've pulled from that research to help you support your claims. But then you need to put all of that together so that it makes a nice, full, developed paragraph that makes sense for readers and takes us through your thinking, all the way from the topic sentence through the explanation. So our quote sandwich method just refers to using quotes, and you've got this nice metaphor of like a burger, right? So the topic sentence, or this is your claim, is the bun. That's the top. Then we have a signal phrase, so that's where you're going to say something like the author states or according to this author. Then you have the evidence itself, which is the quoted information. Then you've got your MLA citation, and then lastly, your explanation. And if you think about the quote sandwich method, you can see that. Think about a burger. If you have any of these things missing, then it's not really a complete burger, right? If you're missing the topic sentence or you're missing your bun, nobody wants a burger with one half of a bun, probably. Or if you're missing some of the toppings that you like, that's not fun either. So you want to make sure that you have all of these things put together so that your paragraph, like the perfect burger, is nice and fully developed and feels complete and doesn't seem like it's missing anything. So this is an example of what this quote sandwich method looks like if I write all of these things down. So first, I've got my claim. One reason people remain addicted to drugs or alcohol is a lack of opportunities to socialize with others, which leads to a feeling of emptiness that they try to fill with drugs or alcohol. So this is my claim. It's clearly focused. It lets the reader know that we're going to talk about a specific thing, which is that emptiness and a lack of socialization might, help cause drug addiction or alcohol dependence. So that's the claim. Then I've got the signal phrase. In the article, What Does Rat Park Teach Us About Addiction by Lloyd Sederer, the doctor explains that drugs, then I have my quote and my citation, so this would all be typed out in my paragraph. So the doctor explains that drugs transport us away from the loneliness and isolation. That's why we use them. And then I have my MLA citation, which is just the page number here. So after all of this, then I have one of the most important parts of my paragraph, which is the explanation. So this is where I, as a writer, am talking and explaining why this quote is so important and why it supports the claim. Clearly, it isn't simply that addicts choose to stay addicted to drugs because they like doing them. Instead, it seems like people who become addicted might do so in part because they're not able to socialize with others in ways that make them happy. Since these people are lonely and isolated, they turn to drugs as a way to escape those feelings. Sadly, once someone is addicted to drugs, it can become even more difficult for them to form close relationships or turn to friends and family for help, which increases their isolation and increases their drug use. It's a vicious cycle that keeps repeating. So you can see that in my sample paragraph here, although it's kind of broken up so you can see the claim and the signal phrase and the different parts of it, the explanation piece really ties everything together for readers, because if I had just left the paragraph like this, where I've got this nice strong claim and I have my evidence and it's got a signal phrase and all of that good stuff, it's going really well and it's a start, but it's not until I get to this explanation part that my reader can really see or get a sense of what I have to say about the subject. So this is really important, not only in your essay, but also in your discussion board posts. I need you guys to be practicing this so that when the time comes to write your essay, you're used to writing paragraphs in this format, and it'll earn you a much better grade on the essay because it's just a lot more complete. I mean, imagine if I only gave you this, how, you're left sort of saying, okay, well, here's the claim and here's some evidence, but I don't feel like it's been put together for me, right? So we want to get in the habit of using that quote sandwich method to write these nice, fully developed paragraphs. Okay, so a quick recap about discussing complex problems. First, look for all of the reasons that a problem exists. Then list all of the contributing factors you can find and all of the sources you have on the subject. Make claims about each factor you wish to discuss in the essay. Find evidence that supports those claims, and then use the quote sandwich method to add the signal phrase, citation, and explanation to your claims and evidence to build those paragraphs. Okay, so that is a quick overview of how to talk about those problems. As always, if you have any questions about anything or you need additional support or additional help, talk to your groups, talk to a tutor, or talk to me. All of us can help you with those things. And we want to get in the habit of practicing this, quote sandwich method and talking about problems in complex ways so that when the time comes to write the research paper, you've already been doing this and practicing it.